You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, everybody, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for the show. Welcome to Head to Head, Star Wars podcast, where right now we're reviewing each of the episodes of The Bad Batch. And of course, I have to start out the show. We were joking about this earlier. I did not even realize this until this morning, by the way. There were 2 episodes released on Wednesday. I did not see that. In case you guys didn't clue in, if you look at the thumbnail for this show, if you look at the banner down below, we're reviewing episode 6. So I do realize that, yes, episode 7 was actually released at the same time. But, you know, usually when I go and I access these things, I'll go to Disney Plus, I'll go to season 3, and I'll scroll down the drop down. I didn't do that this time. When I watched it on Thursday, it was just like, okay, latest episode of Bad Batch. Okay, cool. I clicked that. I watched that. Unlike Daryl, who actually stayed and saw that the next episode popped up, I didn't even stay in that long. As soon as, you know, the created by Dave Filoni thing popped up, I got out of it because, again, it's been a very brutal work week. We're doing 6 days a week, 9 to 12 hours a day. So it was all I could do to even get this in there. So as a result, we're going to be reviewing episode 6 today. I recognize that a lot of you guys, either watching live or on the rebroadcast, including Daryl, have already seen episode 7. I get that. And I understand. But, you know, just due to unforeseen circumstances, what we're going to do is we're either going to maybe pre-record episode 7 within the next few days or something, or we'll just hold on to it for next week and then just do 7 and 8. Or I don't know, maybe even 7, 8, and 9. I'm going to pay a lot closer attention now to what's actually been released.
Yeah, I mean, you know, usually it's funny because usually they would announce like, oh,
Right.
you know, 2 new episodes this week or something like that, you know. But they just kind of snuck that. Like I said, had I not stayed to the, you know, as the credits are going, you know, I wouldn't have saw that it says, oh, start next episode, because that's what clued me in. So I hear you. Like it would have been very easy to miss if you weren't really paying attention, or if you just heard it. Like as soon as you knew the episode was over, you turned it off. Yeah, you wouldn't have known necessarily.
Which, and I should have known because it ended on such a cliffhanger, right? Like I thought that was weird. Like I'm like, wow, this is where they're gonna end. All right, guess I'll just have to wait till next week. But no. Apparently, I could have just continued watching it, but I didn't. So, I mean, you know, we'll do a more comprehensive review of episode 7, either in the days to come or, like I said, when we go live next, which, you know, will more than likely again be next Sunday at 3:00, and then after that, we should be able to return to our normal schedule. But yeah, that was just, But anyway, episode 6. What were some of your thoughts on this one overall?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, you know, and you'll see, of course, the combination of 6 and 7 was really, really good. But just speaking on 6, I thought it was really interesting. You know, it kind of it had me in a space of Mission Impossible with a little bit of is it Spy Hunter? It was something. It was kind of like it had a different type of feel, almost more of an espionage type thing.
Yes.
Um, almost like a Jason Bourne. I think that's kind of almost like a Jason Bourne or a you know, something to that effect. But I really enjoyed this episode. I really love the new look of the trooper that they had. You know, he kind of looks like Master Chief from like Halo or something. You know, his whole uniform and, you know, everything kind of looked like, you know, Master Chief. But I really enjoyed this episode. You know, it was really, once again, furthering the story of Crosshair joining back up with the crew, and now Echo was kind of having his reservations about like, okay, you know, is Crosshair really, you know, about us, or, you know, same with Rex, and of course, who was it? Wolf? No, the other. Yeah, I think it was Wolf, the guy who's with Rex,
Oh yeah,
the
yeah, I
other
think that
clone
is
with the,
Wolf.
like the
Pretty
yeah
sure that
Wolf with the
is.
flat top.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and just that whole dynamic of Crosshair trying to once again earn the trust of, his fellow and the fellow compadres. It's almost kind of like what we always joked about that we never see, unfortunately, on the Jedi Sith side, where you have someone like Kylo Ren who notoriously did a whole lot of, terrible things on the dark side of things, but then he gets redeemed and becomes Ben Solo. And what if he would have joined back up with the rebellion? Like, people would have been looking at him like, wait a minute, isn't that Kylo? Like, why are we taking him in? And why, so in this situation, of course, Crosshair started off good, more or less, went to the Empire, and then he's defected, and he's back with the Bad Batch. So this whole landscape, made a really good story.
Well, yeah, and I agree. And I mean, this is, we always talk about, okay, what would happen if Star Wars actually did some sort of Mission Impossible, spy thriller, espionage, political intrigue type of a thing. And this episode was a really good example of that. And honestly, it's done very, very well. In fact, there were times where I forgot it was animated. That's how good and compelling it was, is that I forgot that it was an animated show. So David's with us. I want to just bring in some people. Ted Adam Green, of course, is with us. For some reason, his chat didn't appear on here. David's did. David just says hello. But Ted says, for me, the double whammy of episodes 6 and 7 was very much appreciated. And it was a high energy, high tension adventure that seemed to be a pretty significant chapter in the lore for the clones. And speaking on episode 6, I can definitely say that was the case, which of course I'm sure continues into 7, because 6 and 7 were obviously one story arc. But the thing that was cool though was, like, I mean, even when you take the opening scene of this thing, right, with Senator Singh and like what was with them?
You mean you had Hunter, Hunter that was actually like walking with them.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
that was the thing. It was very, very creepy. It was very sinister. Like, you could feel the tension. You almost felt like you were in that group, right? Like you were with them as they were walking down those streets, and you felt the vulnerability of just being out in the open like that. And it wasn't until they got into the building that, okay, they're sort of safe, but of course, as we learn, not really, right? Because it gets attacked. But that's the thing. You start to actually feel the tension, and you feel a part of it. You don't just feel like you're watching this happen. You feel like you're actually a part of that. And that's yet another good example of good writing, good direction, building suspense. The whole episode did this, really. And I just thought that was pretty cool. And then, of course, when they met the Separatist senator, because, again, this is another thing that I thought was really interesting that they need to explore, is, like, you just had this whole war with the Separatists and the Republic. Well, okay, the Empire takes over, and now they're pretty much against everybody, right? They're more or less enslaving people and just essentially ruling over them in a fascist way. Well, now the rebellion and the former Separatists have something in common. They actually have a common enemy now. And so it makes sense that former Separatists would probably join with the fledgling rebellion to try to figure out what to do. And of course, it was good to see her character, because she's somebody that Padme was friends with and was trying to broker a peace deal back in the Clone Wars series. So I thought that was really good.
Well, I always just, find the irony of it all, because on one hand, you have her, she was like on the she was on the other Republic, but then you had he who separatists, if I'm not mistaken, vice versa.
Yeah.
can't recall which one.
I
And
know.
then, but it's the Republic turned into the Empire. And this is like exactly what the separatists were talking, you know what I mean? So it was
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like you were almost on one, like the same group that were the good guys also became the bad guys almost within an instant. I'm like much like Anakin, right?
yeah.
And it's the dichotomy of it is, yeah, but see, then we were cool. Now we're not. It's kind of like,
Right, exactly.
okay,
It's like, no, you weren't right
it's kind
about
of
us. We
weird.
really were good back then. But
Yeah,
now we're not good.
now you have a point now. Like, see, if you made this argument now, I would agree with you. But like, 6 months ago, no. And that's that's what I thought was really interesting. Watching the two senators kind of talk to each other, because essentially you were representing the same people,
Yeah,
but now you're not.
right, right. And that was what was really interesting to me, was watching this. And again, one of the things that I could say about this season is you're getting a lot of subtlety. There's a lot of subtlety
Mm-hmm.
going on between characters, also within the storyline itself, that they're starting to explore. It's more of the nuances instead of just, action scene, and then maybe you have a little bit of character development in between. I mean, the Bad Batch had always done a pretty good job, I thought, of character development and world building, especially because this
Mm-hmm.
time period needs that. But what I really found fascinating is that with this season, they seem to be honing in on that even more. There's more character development. They're going into all the subtle nuances of each character, of each plot point. They're giving us some Easter eggs. They're starting to reference other parts of the franchise, whether they be some of the books, comics, maybe some future series. They're starting to actually weave this common thread between really the entire franchise. And I think that that's really, I think it's needed, honestly. I think it's about time that they pretty much fulfill the Disney promise, which was, hey, you remember back in the days of Lucas and the expanded universe, how you had all these compartmentalized things? Well, now we're trying to unite the canon, which they did. But I think now when you start seeing how this season 3 is unfolding, it's actually doing it in a more cohesive way. Like they're really starting to bring all this together in a very satisfying way. And that's even referencing things that, obviously we're going to see in the sequels, but we're getting hints of it now. And I thought that that was good. And then, of course, once again, you get all this stuff between the senators, and then boom, there's that action scene.
Yeah.
And that was really well thought out, too.
Yeah, I mean, the whole sniper thing, like almost how you have the Empire has basically created like this special ops group, even kind of separate from the Death Troopers. These guys are more like your behind enemy lines kind of operatives.
Oh, you could tell
And
that, too, by the way that,
yeah,
I mean, even later in the episode when he infiltrates, their little hideout or whatever, and he's just sort of wandering
yeah, the
around,
base.
just doing some reconnaissance and all that. It's like, oh, this guy's
Yeah,
really good.
yeah.
And why didn't
I
they
mean,
start
and that's
using those in the Empire? It's like you had all these people, and you're, it's
yeah, it's a wonder like how like okay, you guys are chasing rebels and everything all over the place. Like, why not use these guys? But um but I thought that was a really cool aspect, and it just once again it shows you the vastness of the Empire, because you have now divisions for everything,
yeah,
and like even within the Empire, it's like, okay, well, that's on a need to know basis. Like, nope, you don't have a code clearance for that, basically. Um, so I like that. I like the fact that um, he was really, really good at what he was doing. He reminds you a lot of Crosshair.
yeah.
And that was the cool thing about it. So like when they actually captured him, and then Crosshair meets him, he's like, "Oh yeah, we got to get out of here because I already know what these
Well,
guys are
and
about."
that's the other thing too, because I was partially wondering if maybe that guy was either just in another division or is he part of that same necromancer program, with Crosshair, where they were trying to turn these clones into like these, I don't know, force sensitive. I don't even know what they're doing yet. We don't know. I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen 7. Maybe in 7 they give us more. I'm not sure. I have to preface that. But, so just keep in mind that I've only seen episode 6 here. Again, if you're
Right.
just coming in on this, just watch the beginning of the show. I explain why that was the case, even though there were 2 episodes. But again, this is one of those things where Crosshair was freaked out, and that actually just gave you this sinking feeling in your stomach, because it's like, okay, these other guys don't really realize what's going on. He knows what's going on. He's like, guys, we got to get out of here now, and
Hmm.
that whole interrogation scene too, I just thought was really well done and had just the right amount of suspense. You didn't really know what was going to happen. I don't know, just overall the writing in this thing was, I thought, really good.
Yeah, it was definitely top notch writing. I think it was, to see Crosshair actually at the point, and this is the thing now, and this you talked earlier about nuances and character development and things like that. This is the first time we're really seeing Crosshair show emotions. We see him being more
Yeah.
affectionate and close with Omega. And then now we're seeing him actually scared and kind of freaked out, like, oh no, because he's usually kind of like Mr. Calm, cool, nothing phases him, but he's like, no, we got to go because I know what these guys are capable of because they tried to make, and it makes sense, they tried to make him, and he's like, that's the beautiful part about being defective is that, a lot of things don't affect me like they used to,
Well, what I really
because I
like,
am defective.
exactly, you get all these things, and one of the things that I thought that they did just masterfully well is, and you see this in a lot of the type of movies that we're talking about, is this mystery that's continually unfolding, and they're always
Hmm.
getting the next piece. And it's not like
Hmm.
the audience knows what's up and we're just waiting for the characters to find out, although there's certainly films that are like that too. This is really like we're finding out with them. We're
Yeah.
kind of that silent member of their team, and as they're getting clues, we're finding out, and it's almost like it's unraveling a bigger mystery, and they know that, and we know that, but we don't know what it is, and you just get that feeling like the whole chip in the teeth thing, where they found that chip,
Hmm. Yeah.
and they're like,
Basically a
oh,
cyanide, basically a cyanide capsule that allows you to kill yourself. I mean, that's what I said. It felt very much like a Mission
espionage thing. Yeah,
Impossible, yeah,
completely,
James Bond,
completely
Jason Bourne type thing. Like, okay, if you ever caught, you just got to off yourself
right.
because,
But
you
the thing
know,
is, they're not, they're finding all this stuff out, and this stuff is, they're getting the pieces, and it's being put together slowly, and we're getting the pieces. I mean, obviously,
mhm,
as the audience member, when they're switching back and forth between stories, like if they go back to the Hemlock thing or whatever, okay, yeah, we're getting that, and the clones aren't. But for the most part, they're not revealing too much of the plot, as time goes on, right?
yeah.
But then you also
Also, I
brought
mean,
up another good point too, though, with the whole Crosshair showing, emotion. Like the one scene I couldn't help but be reminded of Jaws, where Omega's like chewing the toothpick thing, kind of like Crosshair. She's like copying some of the movements and stuff. And
yeah,
that reminds me of, in Jaws when, Mike Brody's like looking at Martin and he's like folding his hands and they're, he's just sort of copying his dad's thing, right? I mean, it's
yeah,
it's kind of that further bonding between Omega and Crosshair. Now she's trying to adopt some of his traits, and so that unfolding thing, and of course Crosshair's aware of that, and now he feels almost a little bit nurturing in a way. That's
yeah,
unfolding. So yeah, I like that too.
yeah. I mean, she's got a new weapon now. She's got that whole little pistol crossbow thing. That's just kind of cool. Um, so that's once again, that's kind of more of a sniperish. Using archery is kind of the first sniper, if you will, if you really think about it, because you have to think
Mm-hmm.
about wind trajectory and all that stuff. So before you had sniper rifles, I mean, you had archers, and they were the ones who are really, really good. You know, were basically almost like a sniper. And so, those, that comparison with Crosshair is really cool. And then even the look, like I said, like you got this graphic up, even the look of the costume. I mean, the armor that this almost like a shadow trooper, has on, man. I mean, it's
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, they did, and they're doing a really good job of expanding the lore that way. Like, it's not
Hmm.
too derivative, and because at first that's what I thought it was. I'm like, okay, is this a Death Trooper? Is this a, you know, I wasn't really sure. Well, what is this thing? And
Right. At first, I thought it was a droid, like some
yeah,
weird,
yeah, but
like assassin droid.
and that's part of the whole mystery, right? I mean, that's part of this unraveling mystery. It's like, well, who's this guy now? And I thought the
Hmm.
same thing. I thought, well, maybe it's a droid, maybe it's, we don't know. Because if you look even further, right, I mean, they're talking about the whole M count thing again, and now the clones are finding out about that.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, we know what it is. This is one instance where we as the audience know what that is, but the clones are now finding that out. So they're slowly being brought in on this stuff. And they're also, because if you look at it, especially from like season 2, and even at the beginning of the season, but until now, really the Bad Batch were working on somewhat of the outside of what was going on. They were almost like bounty hunters or pirates in the sense that they would go on these little missions, take what they needed. The Empire didn't really care about them too much. Now they're starting to become more of the focal point of even Palpatine's thing, right? Because now we see that Omega, her blood is pure. It's starting to get into that same thing that we're
Hmm.
seeing with Grogu later in The Mandalorian. Now
Right.
there's a whole M count thing. And so now the Bad Batch is actually being brought into the main focal point of what the Empire's doing. They're basically merging. And I'm finding that just to be really fascinating too, that it's not just, okay, we're going to show you a little bit about what's happening between episode 3 and 4, but in the earlier part. And because remember, in the beginning, it was like, okay, how do these clones, who were once the legitimate army of the Republic, well, now they're more or less discarded. What do they do? How do they handle what's going on in this current climate? And that's really what the first season, maybe 2 seasons were about. But now they're becoming more part of the main plot. And I think that was really cool.
Yeah. I mean, the course again, the trust factor, with Wolf, because he's basically having issues with Crosshairs. Like, dude,
Mm-hmm.
this guy wiped out like my whole squadron, and you just want to all of a sudden start trusting this guy again, and he knows stuff that he's not telling us, and they're constantly asking him like, "What do you know?" He's like, "Look, I don't know anything." But then once Omega starts, debriefing them, like, "Well, yeah, they were taking blood samples, and then Namaste will always try to discard my blood sample," and it was like, "Well, why? I don't know." Um, this whole M count thing, and Crosshair's like, "I've heard of it, but I don't know what that really
Right.
means." And
They don't know the full
so,
picture yet.
yeah, so they're kind of like you said, they're piecing the puzzles, trying to piece the puzzle together, but they need, like, okay, well, where's Tantus? And once again, everything keeps flowing back there. Like, okay, we need to get back to Tantus. One, to liberate their brothers, who are, obviously being held against their will. But then on the flip side of it, they're trying to figure out what the heck the Empire is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And especially why are they, especially because it involves Omega, and they're not going to stop coming after her. So it's like, okay, we need to figure out what the heck that they're doing so we can stop it. So, and unbeknownst to them, like, this is the Emperor's big thing. Like, the Emperor's like, no, this can't fail. Everything else, okay, yeah, that may fall by the wayside. Cool, fine, whatever. This though, mm-mm. And he's like, oh, kind of overseeing it more or less personally, because he didn't send Vader to show up at this place. He came himself to talk to Hemlock.
Right.
So, he he has a very vested interest in Necromancer. So, and I just can't wait to see what, more from Hemlock. Like, we don't see him as much, but I would love to see like what's going on in their end as far as what they're trying to do with Necromancer.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that's got to come. And obviously, like you said, the troopers basically starting to question Crosshair. You're getting a little bit of that because, and you actually alluded to it at the beginning where we talked about, it's too bad that Vader, Kylo ended up dying before. It's like, okay, they basically were redeemed. They turned back to the light side. But then, of course, they sacrificed themselves. The far more interesting thing would have been, which I would have loved to have seen, and we do see that to a lesser degree here with Crosshair, but it's like, well, what happens if you, like you're Darth Vader or Kylo Ren, and then you turn into a good guy? Well, now you got to go up to can you imagine if Vader had went back to the Rebel base with Luke? It's like, hey, I'm a good guy now, I mean, so,
Right.
what are we going to do? I mean,
Especially he's in his whole black armor. I mean, do you give him a different paint job or something? I mean, like, what do you do with all this? I mean, he's got a red blade. Does he try to
there
build another
was
lightsaber that,
I don't remember. There was a it might have been one of those like what if style comics or something. But there was one where they did like if Vader had lived and gone back, and they just had him in white armor. It was like it was his armor, but it was all white. The kind of, and it looked cool actually. And then I think he just had like a blue lightsaber or something like that, and it was really cool. I wish I could find that out. Ted Adam Green basically says, coming in late to the live, and I totally get it, Eric. Yeah. He says, good review of episode 6. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Hey, no
thanks
problem.
for being patient, guys. It'll, like I said, we'll get we'll get episode 7 in there too. Even though I'm sure everybody that's watched this has seen it but me, but that's all right. But yeah, we're getting that to a lesser degree here because Crosshair, this is the kind of thing that would happen, right? You bring him in and they're like, wait a second, this guy was just hunting us down, helping the Empire, doing all that. Now we got to just trust him. And the funny thing is, really, the only one that fully trusts him is Omega. I mean, Hunter's kind of cool with them, but even he's like, yeah, I understand, but,
Maybe even Wrecker, because Wrecker's just like, well, he's back, so.
Yeah, that's true. Right. But, again, it's one of those things where I think it's a good thing to explore, and I like the fact in this that they're not tying that up, that they are letting this thing breathe a little bit, that they are saying, look, it's not going to be Crosshair's back, everybody's popping the champagne corks, and, oh, yeah, he's back, and everybody's treating him normal, because that would be unrealistic.
Yeah, you got to have that gestation period where everybody has to get reaccustomed to, okay, let's make sure he's for real this time.
Exactly. Absolutely. I mean, this is one of those things that I think that they are so doing the right thing by doing that. And the other thing is, if you did it too quickly, you would really be robbing this series of some fantastic storylines, which they're obviously exploiting.
World building, character development,
all
of that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I thought that created great tension. And then, of course, a whole gunfight scene, and, at the end. And, I mean, this is a really well put together episode.
Yeah. If you had to rate it, what would you give it?
Ooh. And have we done that with the rest of these? Nope, that's right. Yeah, we usually didn't. Yeah, I know we haven't, because Ronaldo usually gives us those like weird things like, well, I give it about a 7.7 or so, something like that. He's notorious for doing that. But, I mean, all these episodes, man, are going to be like 8 to 9 for me. Every one from the first one on. Like I said, I think they're just really knocking it out of the park this season. I would give this one a solid 9.
Okay. I'm right along there with you. I probably say like 8.5, somewhere between 8.5 and 9, just because now if you couple it with 7, then I would say like a 9.5. But
all right.
I'll let you I'll let you see the other half of this. But man. I mean,
I'm probably gonna watch it like right after this show.
Right after this. Oh, of course you are. Now.
I mean, I couldn't believe it. If I had had time, honestly, if I had had time to watch it this morning, or if I had known about it before I had to leave. Because I was up for a long time before I had to leave the house today. If I had known that it was there, I mean, It was literally like about 20 minutes before I left the house. I'm like, you know what? I haven't created the live event for today's episode. Let me do that real quick. Like I said, I always go to IMDb, and I'm always like, getting the little synopsis of the episode that I could put in our description. And when I did, and I saw episode 7 had a title, I saw the release date was also on March 13th. I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Now what am I going to do, right? Because they never do this, like you said. Let me see. David's got a chat in here. He says, what do you all think about Omega? I heard she's not an annoying child character. No, not at all. Actually, they sort of
has a little.
Well, she does,
she still
but
has a little bit of it for me, just because she's.
But it's normal though. It's not like that annoying. It's not like how Ahsoka was in the beginning.
She's
inexperienced, but not annoying.
To me, she's the difference between Kevin McAllister and Home Alone 1 versus Home Alone 2. Home Alone 1, he was like a total jerk and annoying, and he was like this bad little kid. Home Alone 2, he was more cool and more grown up and more mature, and he was because of the lessons that he learned after 1, and he became. And I think that's kind of where I look at Omega right now, is that like she's grown up, she understands things a little bit more. She still allows her emotions to get the best of her, but in a way, it's for the greater good. I just personally probably wouldn't. I'm probably leaning towards Crosshair on a lot of things. Like, forget the stupid hound. Let's get the heck out of here.
Well, but I mean, everything that she's doing is normal for her age and for her training, but she's not
right
the way that she was. And the Home Alone thing is probably a good analogy because there's a lot of growth. She is a valued part of the team. She's actually good. It's not like they're just babysitting her. I mean, she really contributes, and she has a little bit of wisdom and experience with her, but she's still inexperienced. And that was what actually made, what was it? Probably episode 5. Which episode was it where Crosshair and her were escaping and they were in that town? And that was 5, right?
Yeah, that's 5, yeah.
Yeah.
No,
4.
4.
Yeah.
4.
Okay. That episode, that really, I think, showed where her character is. Because she was the one that sprung Crosshair out. It was her plan. She was the one that caused it. I mean, she basically executed that plan and it worked. And that's when Crosshair basically got, some respect for her. Like, okay, you know what? You did get us out of here. Because remember, when Crosshair tried to escape, he failed.
Mm-hmm.
Her plan worked. And obviously, because she was inexperienced in comparison with the rest of them, because there's a time where sometimes you got to just draw the pistol out and fight, right? And she was basically digging them into a bigger hole, and that was when she finally let Crosshair off the leash and said, okay, now we're going to do it your way. It's like, all right, cool.
Finally.
Yeah. And, of course, we talked about that episode where you felt that along with them. And that's really one of the strengths, I think, of this season, is that you feel the same emotions the characters do.
Yeah.
And for that to be consistent, like an episode or 2, that wouldn't be that tough. But to consistently be able to do that, that just is, once again, writing and direction.
Especially in animation. It's not,
yes.
You have to always remember that this is an animated show, so it's not even, live action. So that's even more of a feat to try to make that happen.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that in Omega's case in particular, they're giving us a good job of making her relatable. Like, you can understand, look, we all had to learn, we all had to grow, and we were all essentially in the same boat. And the characters that are around her are allowing her to, grow, mature, experience things, but they're controlling it in such a way that it's not overwhelming and she's not going to get killed. But yeah, I think that they have done a really good job with her story arc because she's not falling into that typical plucky kid, comic relief type of a thing that they usually do when they create a character like this.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think, there's more. And I think because now she's the hunted one, she's kind of like, okay, she's going to have to step up a little bit more and understand, like, okay, I can't put, everyone's kind of doing this to save my butt, really. So I have to kind of be on my P's and Q's, so to speak, to make sure everything goes according to plan, so to speak. So yeah, man, great episode. I love 6, and I'm sure you're gonna enjoy 7. So
I'm sure. And I mean, I was gonna, because of course I have, the whole like what I'd like to see next, but I'm gonna hold off on that because I mean it's out there right now, right? I mean it's not the usual thing to review an episode and we're all going, hey, here's what we would all like to see next.
Right, we've all seen it.
Yeah, everybody's seen it except me right now. So I will, of course, reserve that for when we talk about, if we do another standalone show within the next few days. I mean, we got Monday's show, but obviously that's going to be a different topic. Well, whether or not we pre-record the episode 7 review or we just take 7 and 8 next week, then at that point, we'll give the whole, here's what we would like to see next. But I mean, until then, yeah, it's a little bit pointless. But again, I do like where they're going with it. And again, okay, technically we're 7 episodes in, but for the sake of this review, we're 6 episodes into this series. And what amazes me is how they have actually, I mean, the only episode that you might, and people go back and forth on this, most people I think would argue that episode 2 was probably the weakest, even though it's not a bad episode by any means. There's some people who are actually big fans of episode 2 that say 1 is the weak link.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to fall in, of the 6, 7, I'm just going to assume that 7 is amazing too, because you said when you take in episode 7, you would give the whole arc a 9.5. So that tells me all I need to know about that. So I think that, I don't know about you, I'm probably saying that of these 6, 7 stellar episodes, 2 is still probably the weakest of them.
For me, it's 1.
For you, it's 1.
Yep.
For me, it's 2. Most people would actually point to either 1 or 2, because 1 is a lot of setup. So I mean, I get that. But the point is, those are still both very good episodes. And the fact that they've been able to maintain this quality over coming up on half the season is actually something I don't know if they've done in Star Wars yet.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because if you even think of like The Mandalorian, and The Mandalorian is probably, maybe the Clone Wars, but yeah, recently, at least fully under Disney, you look at The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian has had some weak episodes in all the seasons.
Definitely.
That were not really good or filler or whatever. You can go back to the Clone Wars, but the Clone Wars had pretty drawn out bad story arcs too. So far, I think that you guys can let us know in the comment section what you guys think, but this might be the only show and the only season where every episode has actually just been above average, at least. So there is that. All right, well, obviously, I have to go and watch episode 7 now since it's out. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, though, this really only matters now because most of the time when people are watching this, it's a year, 2 years later, people go back, they watch our reviews. Because, look, you guys can go back and watch our season 1 and season 2 review of the show. So if you're maybe you never watched The Bad Batch before. If you haven't, then I would suggest, okay, start with season 1 and then go back and watch our review of season 1. So for the future people watching this, the fact that we only did 6 and not 7 because they were both released won't matter. It only matters this week. Unfortunately, we do the shows live, so it only matters this week. But again, hopefully you guys are enjoying our reviews. If you have any comments, suggestions, anything you want to say to us, you can reach us at head-to-head-SW on X, which is formerly Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all those. Of course, you can comment in the comment section here. You can write in our community tab. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you guys can reach us. And, of course, you can chat live with us. We're usually live every Monday and Friday. Right now, it's been a little bit backwards. I'm thinking that next week, it'll probably be the same time again, Sunday at 3. We should be on Monday at 8. I don't think have we explored what we're going to talk about Monday yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, see if we're on Monday. Then, watch us then, and you guys will see what we're talking about. Okay, so, and then of course David says, "May the force be with you always." You know what? I'm gonna put that up. I haven't put too much up. I put up one comment from David, and he's like, or one member / supporter. I gotta do this. Give David some love here. May the force be with you always. Yeah, well, that's basically the line that we're about to say now. So until next time, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at head-to-head-SW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at head-to-head-swpodcast.com. Until next time, may the force be with you, always.